Settle in for this, Gary. I mean,
it's going to be a bumpy ride.
It's going to be a bumpy ride. My name is Darren Doane, and I'm a filmmaker, but I'm really a wannabe theologian, and I'm a super geek when it comes to the Bible and all things end times and the book of Revelation. And I had a chance to sit down with this man right here, Gary DeMar, and I truly believe he is, well, I'll just cut to the behind the scenes footage. We'll get the intro going. Here we go. Not every day you sit down and you start your day with, we're going to go through all of Matthew 24 and have who I think is probably one of the best exegete. Did you ever think you'd be called an exegete?
No, that's what the word meant.
Right. And maybe not to make him feel uncomfortable, so maybe I won't say the best exegete, but my favorite exegete on the biblical text of Matthew 24. I know that sounds geeky. I know that sounds like, what are you talking about? But look, understanding the Bible, knowing what it says, and the context that it was written in is huge. And if you get Matthew 24 wrong, you could end up having some very weird takes on just the world and how you understand the world, the things you see, how you interpret things around you. And so Matthew 24 is, I believe, just a monumental chapter to understand, to stay a very sane, focused, valuable Christian, in the sense that you want to be contributing to this world and making it better. And I think Matthew 24 is the key to understanding that. Here we go. And this is Matthew 24. So what do other people see here at the end of these verses here?
Well, a couple of things. At verse 9, there's some who say this changes from what Jesus was saying to that generation. So verses 1 through 8 refers to that generation. All of a sudden, verse 9, it's a completely different generation. It's a future generation.
So then you will be handed over to be persecuted. So you're saying from that. So verse 8, a lot of people. So Matthew 24, 1 through 8, people will say, okay, that's the disciples and their
yes.
people and their time period. You're saying that come verse 9, people then jump to the thousands of years.
Yes, I know.
Ahead?
Yeah, gaps and these types of things are common. We'll see a couple of other breaks like that as well. Oh, this is all referring to events surrounding the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, but the second coming is mentioned here as well. But we'll see how that's going to be impossible when we get to verses 33 and 34. But I think one of the most difficult parts is verse 21, because it seems to be so definitive about, this seems like an end of the world type deal, but we've seen the context here is localized, and why all of a sudden jump to some tribulation in the distant future when, as we're going to see, that there's no need to do that. And actually we have some evidence that this tribulation was a reality, because when you get to the book of the Revelation, verse 9, chapter 1, it says, I, John, your brother and fellow partaker in the tribulation. So this tribulation, so if the book of Revelation was written prior to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, which I believe it was, and the temple is still standing in Revelation chapter 11, and we know the temple was destroyed in a few years later.
Right.
Then we're left with book of Revelation was written prior to the destruction of Jerusalem, because this temple is still standing.
But either way, I mean, and again, I don't think I'm not a late date person on Revelation. Let's just say it was. Let's say it was written in 90 or 100.
Probably 90. If John wrote this, you're looking at 90s, because he was certainly an old man by the 90s.
Okay, but either way, he would still be saying here that he was a partaker in the tribulation.
Yeah, and you could make the case that a generation, you could say, okay, I'll take your deal on defining a generation as being 70 years, and say Jesus said this in AD 30. Generation 70 years, 70 plus 30 makes 100. He's writing this in 95. It still fits that generation.
Christians did see persecution on some level in 95, 100, and I mean, so you could.
That's a really debatable topic,
right,
because it's always been that Domitian was the was the big persecutor. And as evidence has come out, that just isn't the case.
Yeah, as they begin to look at these sources, it's one of those one source got carried on, and when everyone went and kind of traced back the one source on Domitian, it didn't seem like he was
right. And we know
that tough on Christians.
Yeah, we know that Nero was in fact
right.
tough on Christians, but this tribulation that's taking place is could have affected the entire Roman world at that time. So John says he is a fellow partaker in the tribulation. That's
okay. So it still puts it in their generation.
Yeah, and it says in the tribulation. He doesn't say I've gone through some tribulation. He says I am a fellow partaker in the tribulation, and the being a fellow partaker means other people were going through this tribulation as well.
Well, that takes us to verse 22.
Verse 22, unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved, but for the sake of the elect, these days shall be cut short. And they were cut short because the events leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem, probably maybe three years, and it intensified. So this was a short period, 3 years. If it hadn't stopped, there's no telling what the Romans would have done throughout Israel, throughout that particular area. We know that Josephus says about 1 million or more were killed, and 50,000 were taken into captivity into Rome. And there is a sculpture of these Jews bringing in the artifacts of the temple into Rome. We don't know what happened to them, but that's a fact. We know from history that took place. It's actually etched in stone to tell us that.
Is that in the arch as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, history is behind so much of this. Then it says, then if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe him. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and will show great signs and wonders, so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. Behold, I have told you in advance.
So again, so it's this part doesn't seem so crazy, right? Because this part we can understand. We haven't even gotten to really crazy language yet.
Right.
Right. Up until this point, Matthew 24 is really just about things that we can identify. There's no real there's no mystery here yet, right? And as far as I wonder what that means. This would definitely be more about timestamps more than anything else. As far as when could these things have happened, not what does that mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
In fact, a lot of commentators, we say that some people have a break in time at verses 8 and 9. But a lot of very, very good contemporary commentators, D.A. Carson, for example, wrote a masterful commentary on Matthew's Gospel. He says this all refers to the destruction of Jerusalem up through verse 28. So it encompasses the Great Tribulation of verse 21 and all these other things. He says that is obviously a reference to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. He sees the switch at verse 29, but we'll get to that.
But Jesus is saying, look, when we get to this time period, the time period that you're going to be living in, he says that if anyone says to look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, do not believe it. False messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time. So I'm assuming there, and we do have evidence of this, of people showing up, right? Even Josephus talks about a false messiah or a messiah type showing up and leading a bunch of people out to the wilderness, right? And a lot of people.
And the book of Acts even mentions a couple of things prior to the coming of Jesus. This was a reoccurring deal. It always is. Even today, there are people claiming to be the Messiah.
You have David Koresh, people like that. The sort of Branch Davidian, someone claimed to be the Messiah. The end times are coming, and people went and clamored and followed. But in this particular time, you had thousands of people believing in false messiahs and prophets, according to Josephus, if I remember, and being let out and then.
Yeah, and look, that's typical of periods of crises. Where people, we're looking for some. You got two things that happens with a crisis. You have there's the scapegoat. Right. Who can we blame for this?
Okay.
And there's the saviors. Who can we get to save us from this? And so it's not unusual that there would be false Christs, false prophets. I mean, Jesus earlier talked about it. We saw that John mentioned many false prophets. We saw Peter saying there were first false teachers. Paul mentions savage wolves. And the book of Acts is just you find indicators of this as well. So there's nothing surprising in any of this, and it could fit some period in the distant future, or it could fit this particular period. But since we are bound, as we'll see in verse 34, there's a time indicator that tells us what the limits of this period of time is going to be.
I guess something that really intrigues me is Jesus says, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, do not believe it. Which means there was a possibility to actually be not so much deceived, although it is being deceived, but to misunderstand something. Look, I was told that if this right here is about the second coming, the end of the world, Jesus comes back, there's no way someone's going to be able to fool me and say, gotcha. Oh, I thought this was the second coming. Jesus was in the clouds. Everything was he came down. I saw, I saw a third of the earth burning. I mean, like, oh, you tricked me.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that our category for what this is actually completely different. Because even in other letters, it talks about don't be deceived if someone says, the day of the Lord has happened. Like Paul tells people, don't be tricked if someone tells you or you get a letter saying the day of the Lord has happened. I don't think you would need a letter.
Well, how could you have gotten a letter? How could you have gotten a letter from the people who were raptured? In fact, Paul even says you got a letter from me.
Right.
Which would have meant, wait a minute, how could this be a letter from Paul if what is being described there is a rapture or the second coming?
Right.
Because how could he have written the letter?
Right. And if all these catastrophic, the world burning up and if that had to take place, you couldn't fool someone that it had taken place. So it makes me think, as you're saying this, that really the category here is back to what we talked about. It's about judgment, which means there would have been an opportunity for people to say, this judgment or this thing we just experienced must be the thing Jesus was talking about. This must have been the final judgment. And Jesus is saying, don't buy that. Trust me.
Yes.
When the final judgment comes on the temple, you're gonna know. Because I think like you had 10, 20, 30,000 people got brought out to the wilderness and died. You still had things happening where people were killed in the temple. I think there was an event where something fell and killed thousands of people in the temple. I think Josephus writes about it. I'm going to double check it. And so people could have been thinking, was this the judgment? There was people in the temple and something fell and killed a bunch of people. I think there was a rebellion or something. So there could have been a lot of potential things for people to interpret forms of judgment as the final judgment. That's a hunch.
Yeah, well, there are even today. I mean, there's a ring of earthquakes in California is taking place. Oh, this is a sign of the end and all that. But this is indicating that some personage could come up and maintain that they were the promised Messiah. And what's interesting about this, notice how Jesus doesn't answer it the way you would think he would answer it if the traditional interpretation is the correct interpretation. It says, then if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe him, for false Christ, etc., 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 for I told you in advance. Jesus would say, oh, no. Look, when I show up, when I show up as a returning Messiah, you're going to see me coming down to earth and setting up a millennial kingdom and so forth. You're really going to know that this is the case.
Right. If that's what he's talking about, he's going to say, look, you're not going to be fooled. You're going to see heaven, this kingdom, coming out of the clouds.
Yes.
You're going to know.
Right. Yes. The idea of going out into the wilderness or to the inner room, which is later on here, that's not very messianic. I mean, that's not really some, the return of a king. Right. This is Bush League, minor league messiahship here.
Which he picks up on. He says, so if anyone tells you, there he is, out in the wilderness, do not go out. Here he is, in the inner rooms, do not believe it. Okay? For his lightning that comes from east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. That started off real simple, right? It's a continuation. There he is, out in the wilderness, don't go. Which, by the way, would also tie into, hey, Messiah's out in the wilderness. Remember he told us to get out of Jerusalem? It's time to get out of Jerusalem and get to the wilderness. Right?
Sure.
Oh, let's go to the wilderness. It's time to go. He says, don't go. But you get he said, flee to the mountains. Here he is in the inner rooms. Okay, do not believe it. But now we have this switch. Now this is where
I think this
different language comes in.
I think verse 27, for just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. That word coming here is the same word that's used in Matthew 24:3. What will be the sign of your coming? Parousia or parousia. And I believe they associated this judgment on the temple, your house is being left to you desolate, as a judgment coming.
Which is why he ends by saying, wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. We're still talking about something that's going to lay a lot of people out. They're going to be dead.
Yes. So this is judgment coming language, and this same language is used in the Book of Revelations, chapter 2 and 3, where Jesus threatens to come to certain churches in judgment. Well, those aren't the second coming. Those are local, provincial judgments on individual churches, and you see the same thing in the Old Testament. In Isaiah chapter 13 about the judgment on Babylon, you see the same thing in Isaiah 19:1, where God comes down on a cloud and the idols shake at his presence, tremble at his presence. Right. I mean, that's judgment coming language. And so Jesus is really answering the question here. My coming, this particular coming, is a judgment coming, and it is what I told you, not one stone here is going to be left upon another. The Romans are going to be the agent of my judgment. And this is important because if you get to Daniel chapter 1, and a lot of people will ridicule this. Oh, so Jesus comes as the Roman armies. And I said, well, in a sense, yes. Book of Daniel, chapter 1, verse 1, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. But listen to the next verse. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. Who's doing this? God. Well, at our eye level, Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's doing this. But we lift the veil. We know what's really going on. God is the one who's using Nebuchadnezzar to do this. It's no different here in what we read in Matthew 24. Mm-hmm. And as we'll go through this, we'll start seeing more and more examples of the Old Testament being quoted to make the case of what's going on here. We're going to see the language that's being used is language that was used to describe the judgment that took place upon Babylon. So in essence, first century Jerusalem is the new Babylon. And we see this in the book of Revelation as well.
Okay, so verse 27, it switched because now, again, at least there's this language switch. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Meaning, you're going to know. This is not, and again, this connects with, this is not go out to the wilderness. This is not go to the inner room. When Jesus comes to do what he's about to do, you're going to know it.
Right. You're going to know it within the confines of the temple.
Right.
So you're not looking all over the place to see where this is going to take place. This is the indicator. It's got to happen here, and that's why when Luke says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, that's added to the context here. It's really getting close, because now the Romans are cutting off any escape that's going to take place. So this isn't a worldwide judgment. Someone says, well, light flashing from the east to the west. That's local. If when I'm in Marietta, Georgia, and you guys are having lightning out here, I can't see that.
Right.
I only see it in terms of the horizon, and this is the same language.
Interesting.
This is not that complicated to understand.
Well, 28. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. So,
which is a quote, which is taken right from the Old Testament, Deuteronomy 28:49, Jeremiah 4:13. Look, and remember, these are Jews who pretty much knew their Bible, maybe not in all the theological implications of everything, but they knew it well enough when they heard.
They know the hits.
Yeah, especially
they know the radio hits.
Especially Deuteronomy 28, because Deuteronomy 28 was a covenantal lawsuit against Israel. You do this, you're okay. You do this, judgment's coming.
Oh wow!
And so you have this idea of the vultures, or some have said the eagles. My translation uses vultures. It's hard to tell in terms of animals of what the Greek means back then, but the symbol here is coming from the Old Testament on all of this.
Okay, but here's the verse 29. Okay, but verse 29, it's in quotes. Is this quoting Jesus, or is because it's broken down differently in my Bible?
Your Bible has done a paragraph break, indenting left and right.
Yeah.
And I don't know okay, so that's telling you that is a direct quotation from the Old Testament. My translation, it identifies direct quotations from the Old Testament by using all small capital letters.
Okay. So this is a quote
from the Old Testament. Yes.
I mean, sidetracked here. How do we know? Is it? I mean, is a Bible translator doing this for us, or is it in the Greek somehow we know it's a quote?
No, you wouldn't know that. No.
You wouldn't know.
No, the Greek manuscripts, it's kind of humorous. You look at the Greek manuscripts, and some of the Greek manuscripts don't even have spaces between words.
Wow.
But you could do the same thing in English. In fact, we just took all the spaces out, you'd be able to read it.
You could still do it, right?
So they understood. But these are translators.
But this is a direct quote.
This is a direct quotation.
It's a direct quote. Okay. Immediately after the distress of those days. Where does that put us in the timeline?
Okay.
Maybe help me out here.
And I mentioned D.A. Carson, who's a fine Bible commentator. He makes the division. He says, up through verse 28, this refers to AD 70, the destruction of the temple. But verse 29 switches time frames and takes us to what he believes is a future end of the age.
So immediately after the distress of those days, everything we just read about.
Yes.
He's saying after all that, this.
Yes.
Which is now
sometime in the future.
Or at least just after this event.
Right.
Okay.
But you see the problem immediately with it.
Well, I mean,
can you identify what the problem is immediately without?
Well, he's still talking to his disciples.
Yeah, but what else?
Right.
But, what does it say? But immediately. I don't know what your translation is.
Immediately
okay.
After,
but immediately after the tribulation of those days.
Right.
So.
Yeah, but you're acting like words matter, Gary.
Yeah. Yeah, so it says, but immediately after the tribulation.
Why is it soon and immediately and all? Why
all of a sudden they mean something different?
Yeah, why is it those words all of a sudden? Yeah, if it's prophetic, they just don't mean that anymore.
Now we know somebody, and we have a good friend who was going through all this just like we are doing here.
Right, yeah,
and he could not. He
had heard that you had a tape series. And our friend had said, before we were all friends, said, well, there was this Gary DeMar guy, and he was going to talk about Matthew 24, and he said, well, I listened to this tape because I said to myself, what's he going to do with the sun being darkened, and the moon not giving light, and the stars falling from the sky? Like, I can't wait to see how he gets out of this one, because if you're telling me this already happened, he said, and then he got to it, and he said, I had to rethink some things. So here we go, because everything we've been talking about comes down to this, which is kind of funny because it doesn't feel so big anymore. if you just jump to verse 29, it seems like a real heavy verse to handle. But going through 21, 22, 23, 24, and everything we've talked about, all of a sudden I don't have the same kind of weight that you have if you just jump into this.
So now you're left with, if this is talking about this particular generation and all these things apply to that particular generation and the limited geography and just going to the mountains and so forth, and now you got this big thing here about the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light and the stars will fall from heaven. I want you to read your read your version.
Okay, the NIV says immediately after the distress of those days, quote, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken.
Okay.
So if this already happened,
I want you to read the next verse. We're not going to interpret the next verse. I want you to read the next verse in your translation.
Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory.
Okay.
So I think I'm already seeing something. So
okay.
So let me just.
Okay.
I've never done this.
Okay.
There's a couple things we are prepared for,
All right.
but I've never done this, and I think you just made me do it. If the sun is darkened, if the moon doesn't give any light, and the stars fall from the sky, and all the heavenly bodies are shaken, whatever we say from a grammatical standpoint, those stars have now crashed on the earth.
Yes.
Everyone's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. You can't crash. If this is a literal understanding of a cosmic shakedown,
yes.
I mean, 2 asteroids coming to our planet, and it would take most of us out.
Yes.
If the stars fell, which we know, if I'm taking this literally, you can't destroy the world. And then Jesus comes down and we all see it because we'd all be destroyed.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people, there are a lot of Bible commentators.
Unless I'm dead. Unless we all die.
Well,
unless that's let me just work this. Unless all that comes down and we die. But we're still able to see Jesus come down. You're not buying it. Yeah. We're still able to see Jesus come down because he's about to judge us and he's about to separate us. Wheat from the tares, sheep from the goats. No, you're not buying it. You're not. Okay. It's hard.
Yeah, it is.
It's hard. Okay.
And there are a lot of commentators who look to the book of Revelation and say, look, Revelation chapter 6 is really Matthew 24.
But I already know now that you have me thinking about this, it's going to be hard to reconcile those two.
Okay, so verse 12, chapter 6, Revelation 6, and because your observation about what happens to the stars is extremely important.
Right.
And I looked when he broke the 6th seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth,
right,
made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth.
Right.
As a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. This is Revelation 6. And yet you've got 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. You've got all these other chapters.
Right.
The earth is still here, but if the stars fell to the earth, it's all over. In fact, if the stars even got close to the earth, it would be all over.
And what's funny is because I immediately, when pressed on that, I want to say, well, God does supernatural things. He stops time. He stops the sun. I mean, he could maybe in some way this judgment of stars coming down, he's just going to do some really crazy stuff, and
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay.
With God,
right,
all things are possible.
Sure,
but.
Maybe just not certain.
Look at the text here.
Okay, well then, okay.
Okay, but
I want to the context. Hold on.
There's another observation I want you to look at verse 29. You didn't see it because you didn't know the Greek behind it.
Okay, well hold on. But what I like about what you're doing though right here is you're saying, look, I'm not trying just to skip past this this passage here. You're saying let's go all in.
Yeah.
Like if we're gonna deal with the most, proof texted of proof text, like, come on, when did this happen? You're saying, no, let's really look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, what don't I see because I don't read Greek?
Okay. Verse 29, it uses fall from the sky, but the next verse it uses the word heaven. Is that right?
Okay.
It's the same Greek word, oranos.
So the stars will fall from the
Sky.
and the sky.
And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in. Yours is actually a better translation. Read and we'll get to it, but read verse 30.
Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven.
In heaven. Okay. But it's the same Greek word. So what you have within two verses, one being translated as sky, and the other one being translated as heaven.
Right.
This is going to become important. Heaven is the better translation.
Okay.
But I just want you to note, translations can be a little tricky, and we miss some things when we don't see the original text behind the translation.
Right.
That's just a point to bring out because it's going to become important. And your translation gets something very, very right.
NIV.
Yeah.
Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven.
Okay.
And
but let's not. We're not going to go there yet. I just wanted to point out that verse 29, sky is being used, but in verse 30, heaven is being used. I believe it's twice.
The sun will be darkened, and the
yeah.
moon will not give its light.
Right.
The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken.
Okay.
Then
now,
will appear.
This is a direct quotation from Isaiah chapter 13, verse 10, which is used to describe the judgment upon Old Testament Babylon. So
this seems like an important one to turn to.
It is, yes. And I've looked at the commentators and commentaries on Isaiah chapter 13 who will claim that Matthew 24, verse 29 refers to something in the distant future, all right?
Okay.
And they'll maintain that this hasn't happened yet, but yet when you go back and look at their comments on Isaiah chapter 13, verse 10, they admit that this is typical Old Testament judgment language describing the fall of a particular nation.
So Isaiah 13, I'll back up. Isaiah chapter 13, verse 9 says, "See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. I will punish the world for its evil, the wicked for their sins. I will put an end to the arrogance of the haughty, and will humble the pride of the ruthless."
And I want you to look at verse 13.
"Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake from its place at the wrath of the Lord Almighty in the day of his burning anger."
Now I want you to look at verse 17.
"See, I will stir up against them the Medes." Okay, so he's saying how he's going to do this.
Yes.
Okay, so he's saying, I'm going to destroy the whole world.
Yes.
I'm going to destroy the whole world. Here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make the stars are going to fall, the moon's no longer.
Everything's going to shake. The heavens are going to tremble. The earth is going to shake from its place. But this is about the judgment upon Old Testament Babylon.
And so here's how I'm going to do it. Here's what it's going to look like. Yeah. Who's going to be the deliverer of the bad news? Right. The as you said, the agent. "See, I will stir up against them the Medes, who do not care for silver and have no delight in gold. Their bows will strike down the young men. They will have no mercy on infants, nor will they look with compassion on children."
Yeah, the fruit of the womb, actually. So
I'm going to send the Medes in, and they're going to wipe you out.
Yeah, and this is a prophecy against Babylon, and we read about it in the book of Daniel.
And everybody agrees, though, that this was fulfilled.
Yes. And yet the language is identical to what we read here. So Jesus is appropriating this language because Jerusalem is acting like Old Covenant Babylon, and it's bringing the same type of judgment. But in this case, it's going to be the Romans, and it's not going to be the Medes and the Persians, because the Medes and the Persians don't exist anymore. And yet every Bible commentary I've ever checked has Isaiah chapter 13 referring to this as a judgment upon Old Testament Babylon, and this is typical language in order to make that case.
So this would be the equivalent of you've got somebody in the first century, and they're looking back at Isaiah, right? And someone says, well, look, I know the Medes showed up and did all those horrible things, but that clearly couldn't have been what he was talking about, because the stars never fell from the sky.
Yeah.
The moon never lost its light. Yeah, we had some earthquakes, but there's always earthquakes.
Yeah.
I mean, you would say, well, no, it's
nobody would ever. They would say this.
Right.
This is going to be monumental.
Right. So everyone reads it this way, though.
Yes, but they don't. Yeah, they don't. Yeah,
then you get to Matthew 24, and all of a sudden, every rule of biblical interpretation,
yes,
gets thrown out the window, and it says this has got to be future. It could not have happened back then, and we're still waiting for it. I mean, there's something going on that.
Yes. Now we have to ask this question: sun, moon, and stars. Where have we heard that before?
What's Genesis language?
Yeah.
It's creation language.
How was, well, yes, and remember Joseph in his dream.
Oh, right.
Joseph in his dream. Joseph has a dream, and he says he sees the sun, the moon, and the stars bowing down to him. And he's thinking, well, that never happened. Did that really happen anywhere?
No, but his family gets upset because they know exactly what.
They knew what it meant.
It meant
the sun, the father,
right.
the moon, the mother, and his siblings, the stars. So here you have Old Testament Israel being identified as sun, moon, and stars. And you see something very similar in Revelation chapter 12, where there's this woman who gives birth, and she's standing on the moon. She's clothed with the sun, and she has 12 stars around her head.
So it's sun, moon, and stars.
Stars again.
It's
representative of Israel. In this particular case, these two ideas are brought together. This is judgment language upon Babylon. This is a depiction of Israel. And you find that Jerusalem is New Testament Babylon, and God is bringing judgment. And he's using that language that he's used before and identifies with Israel. This isn't about the physical sun and the moon and the stars falling from the heavens and hitting the earth. That's not what this is about.
Okay, so what's striking me right now is once we get to start, once you just said what you just said, it actually took some creativity.
Yes.
Right? It was creative biblical language with pictures and signs, and okay, wait. Now we went back to a dream, sun, moon, and stars. The sun, moon, and stars represent his family. You went father, mother. You made the moon a mother all of a sudden, and the stars were brothers and sisters, and they're all going to bow down. But that's how they took that dream. Okay, I'm kind of. I mean, we're. That's
the way the dream. I mean, I'm not. That's not my
right.
interpretation.
Right.
That's Genesis 37's interpretation
right.
of that dream.
So it's getting a little weird.
Depending on your approach,
right. and we have weird stuff in the Bible. I guess that this is my point. It's getting a little weird right now, but I understand the weirdness because I have biblical pictures to guide me in where this is getting weird, right? I mean, this is a weird book. We're talking about being covered in blood and our sins are forgiven. I mean, this is all weird. This is all crazy, weird stuff, right? So, but I see that now. The opposite would be is that when people have another interpretation of how to read Matthew 24, I don't have biblical grounding anymore for what people tell me. Now they tell me it's Ronald Reagan, or it's the guy over in Russia, or there's going to be this little Jewish kid born who's going to rise up, and it's left behind stuff, and it's still trying to answer all these questions, but it's with things in the future that I don't even.
Yeah, you have no guide.
I have no guide. Right now, it just got a little weird, but I'm totally grounded in the biblical narrative of what this is explaining.
Yes, yeah. The other way you've really left the Bible.
Right.
You left the Bible, or you're not trusting the Bible to do what you said you were going to do, and that is let it interpret itself. And this similar language is also found In Ezekiel 32, verses 7 and 8, this is talking about Pharaoh in Egypt. It says, when I extinguish you, I will cover the heavens and darken their stars. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light. All the shining lights in the heavens I will darken over you, and I will set darkness on your land, declares the Lord God. This type of language is all through the Old Testament prophets. Wow. It's not unusual.
So if we know that language, we should get here to Matthew 24, and we should say, I've heard this language before. I know exactly what it means.
Yes.
It means that God's coming in judgment.
He's coming in judgment, and it's going to be a very bad. You're going to have a very, very bad day.
So then
look at verse 30, and yours is a better translation than what I have in the New American Standard.
I mean, I could give you this Bible. I know you go around traveling a lot with this Bible. I feel like it's...
No, I want you to...
For a person that does Matthew 24, we need to get you better translations.
Well, I'll tell you what I always do is you have to look at the Greek, and there's so many. You don't even have to be a Greek scholar to know to be able to look at a Greek English interlinear. They're all over the internet, and to see these words in Greek, you can probably figure out most Greek letters are like our English letters. You know, we got the O and the U and the B and the K and right. Even L to a certain extent, or Ranos. You can figure that out. The only kind of odd letter there is the R sound that looks like a P. Okay. So and you can look at that and see that Oranos is being used in verses 29 and 30, and yet the translators are translating it two different ways. Right. One sky, one heaven. I believe heaven is the better translation. And but I want you to read verse 30 and the first part of verse 30, and you're going to see how this better translation fits everything that we've been talking about.
Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Okay. So I mean, first time I walked into a church, I mean they had that verse written and painted, and there were clouds, and there was Jesus.
Yes.
And he was coming down.
Very popular depiction.
Right.
But notice what the sign. What is the sign?
Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven.
The sign.
So it's not the Son of Man.
Yeah, it's the son. The sign is the Son of Man in heaven. It's the sign is that the Son of Man is in heaven. That's the sign.
Well, then why wouldn't, I'm going to push you here. Well, then why wouldn't it say, then will appear the sign that the Son of Man is in heaven?
I mean, that's a good question, but Greek is just Greek, and it oftentimes, if you notice in the King James Version of the Bible, you'll see words in italic that they put in there to kind of smooth out the translation somewhat, but they're telling you that those words are not in Greek.
So that's a little. So let me just read that again. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven.
Yeah, the sign is that the Son of Man is in heaven, and
we're
going to support that by the rest of the passage.
Okay, so the sign that they're going to see is that the Son of Man is in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Okay, so I'm tracking with the first part. What will appear will be a sign. That sign will signify that the Son of Man is in heaven.
Okay, and this explains verses 24 and 25 for us. Or verses 23, 24, and 25. If anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe him. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and will show great signs and wonders, so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. Behold, I have told you in advance. If therefore they say to you, behold, he is in the wilderness, do not go forth, or behold, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe them. The reason for that is he's in heaven.
Okay.
This is not a Jesus coming down to earth on a cloud. And as we'll see this, there's more. What we're seeing here is it's a quotation from the book of Daniel. And also there's a little footnote here. It says, in the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the tribes of the, and there should be a little footnote where it says earth.
And it says land.
Land.
All the tribes of the land. Well,
Yeah.
we haven't gotten there, so hold on. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's verse 30.
Oh, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, meaning
Right.
that the sign is that the
He
Son is now in
heaven.
heaven. And then all the peoples of the earth, but if I look at my note here,
Tribes of the land,
or tribes of the land, which makes it now much more local.
Yeah.
Right? Tribes of the land.
which is the tribes of Israel.
Tribes of Israel, okay. And then all the peoples of the earth, or
Tribes
the
of
tribes
the
of
land.
Israel, tribes of Israel, will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So now it still seems like now he's coming on clouds. He's going to be riding clouds
Right.
with power, right? I mean, and we've seen God in the past show up with clouds, right?
Yes.
But yet this is judgment.
I don't think this is this isn't judgment.
Oh, you don't think this is judgment?
I don't think it's. I think it's.
interesting.
I think it's enthronement.
Oh,
I think it's enthronement, and it's not judgment. The verse 29, verse 27 was the judgment.
okay.
Now we're looking at the real sign.
What
The-
29? What about 29? That's judgment, right?
Yes, that's judgment.
Right.
But the what brings this all together here is
Okay.
this enthronement. Jesus sitting on the throne. Heaven is his throne and earth is his footstool. And how do we know all this? We know it because this is a direct quotation from Daniel chapter 7,
13.
which almost everybody admits that's what's going on here.
Okay. So read Daniel 7, 13 through 14.
Okay. I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him.
Okay, so this isn't Jesus coming to the earth.
Right.
Power, in might, and glory, and clouds on clouds. So we think it's him now coming here.
Yes.
Okay? You're saying it's the opposite direction. It's Jesus now taking his rightful place back. He's coming in power and glory on clouds. He's coming back in to sit next to the Father?
Well, this is Jesus was taken up into heaven in clouds, and so this is the ascension and the enthronement. But people didn't. The whole point of this is that they did not recognize who Jesus was. They dismissed him, tried to kill him, and do away with him. The reality here is he is in fact the promised Messiah. He takes his seat in the heavens, sitting at his Father's right hand. It's all pictured metaphors and so forth and so on. That's what they missed, and that's why this judgment was taking place, because they're still holding to this earthly idea. We still need the temple. We still need animal sacrifices. We killed the heir. We put the Lord of glory to death. We crucified him. We did everything we could in order to get rid of him. And what they finally realized when the temple is going under this destruction, they begin to realize that Jesus is who he said he was, because he made this prophecy and told them that he was going to be the enthroned one who would be sitting in heaven at his Father's right hand.
So then, okay, so now let me ask you.
And that's why they're mourning. See, the mourning is taking place because they rejected, they held on to this temple and everything it represented. And the mourning is taking place because they failed to recognize that Jesus was always the indicator of all of these ideas about related to the temple and the sacrifices and so forth. That's why they were mourning. They missed the boat, and they're being judged as a result.
Okay, so if verse 29 is destruction language again, that we've seen all throughout the Old Testament, destruction language, judgment language, then verse 29 you're saying is the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in the year 70.
Right.
86. That's the destruction. Then you're saying verse 30, now it's over.
Yes.
You say the destruction is over if we're trying to follow a timeline here. Then will appear the sign. of the Son of Man is now in heaven. What's well, if that's all being destroyed, if the judgment is what's described in 29, well, then what appears?
I think the appearance is that they recognize that he was in fact the promised Messiah. I don't think there's a physical appearing that takes place.
But would you say Josephus it's a little bizarre what Josephus describes?
There are some things in Josephus where he says the heavens were opened and the chariots were were going back and forth and so
a big sword. Like
yeah,
there's some crazy language.
There is crazy language in that. That's all possible. But I don't think that's what this is dealing with.
I mean, Tacitus even writes very strange things about what he witnessed. He was an eyewitness.
Yes, but this is biblical theological language.
I get it. Okay.
I'm trying to stick with. I want anybody who reads the Bible who can understand these things. This is the enthronement. Okay.
So let's say then will appear the sign
that the Son of Man is in
heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So,
recognizing that the Son of Man coming
so when they see, you're saying when they understand.
Yes. Yeah, we use that languages all the time.
I need you to see
it.
This.
Do you see this?
Right. Do you get it? Do you see it? Okay, so you're all right. And he will send his angels
with a great trumpet. Borrowed language from the Old Testament. I think that is in it's Isaiah 30. Is it Isaiah 37? See 31.
He will send his angels with a loud trumpet.
The loud trumpet. Okay, the trumpet. 31. See, where is that? Isaiah chapter 27:13. When God calls the Jews back to the land, it talks about he does this with a loud trumpet. Well, again, I think the language is metaphorical. It's the kind of the call of the gospel, going forth at this particular point. It's not there's a trumpet that's going to be blown. Although I guess a lot of people believe that's going to be the place.
And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other.
Yes.
So you see that as a gathering of who and when? I
think it's talking about that language of gathering is bringing the Jews and Gentiles into a single body. Ephesians 2 talks about the dividing wall. See, the dividing wall is broken down. But the one thing that was still standing, that still operated as a dividing wall between Jews and Gentiles, was the specifics of the temple.
Right.
Once that goes, and both Jews and Gentiles embrace Jesus as the promised Messiah, there's no longer a barrier. You don't have to be a physical Jew to be saved. Right. The Gentiles were grafted into an already existing Jewish church. That's what first few chapters of the book of Acts. The church isn't some new phenomenon in the New Testament. I know that dispensationalists like to say there's a division between Israel and the church. That's the Greek word ekklesia was used in the Old Testament, just in the New Testament, and it simply meant the congregation,
the gathering.
The gathering. The word synagogue is more the gathering,
okay.
But the Greek word ekklesia means congregation or assembly. In fact, William Tyndale, when he translated the New Testament into English, he didn't use the word he didn't use the word church. That church, the idea of church, is a made-up word. The Greek word is ekklesia, and it was to be. We get the word ecclesiastical about it.
Right.
And King James, when he gets these translators together, one of the things they had to do,
You're going to blame this whole thing on King James?
No, I'm not going to blame all of it on King James. But Tyndale, when he translated the Greek word ekklesia, he translated it as congregation or assembly. And he burned at the stake because of that. Because the king in those days was the head of the church as well as the state. And one of the provisions in translators is they had to translate ekklesia as church. because it was under the domain of the state. If it was just congregation or assembly, there wouldn't have been any jurisdictional overseeing of the church by the state. And we can see this. Yeah, I know it's a history that a lot of people don't know. But here, I can give you an example of this. If you look at Acts chapter 7, verse 38, this is Stephen giving really the history of Israel.
Yeah.
He says, this is the one who was in the ecclesia in the wilderness together with the angel who was speaking to him on Mount Sinai. Ecclesia, which is often translated as church.
Right.
So the King James Version reads this way. This is Moses, this is the one who was in the church in the wilderness.
Right.
Now, that doesn't fit the...
Right.
So
Yeah.
the better translation is this is the one who was in the congregation or the assembly in the wilderness. So every time you read the word church in the New Testament, you should translate it as congregation or assembly.
And so you see this then as the gathering, when we see this gathering here, and he will send his angels.
Some have said
messengers.
that. Some have said it messengers. The Greek word angelos. John the Baptist was called an angel. He was an angelos. He was a messenger.
Right.
Some have said R.T. France says no. This is actual supernatural work by angels to bring this about.
Okay.
But it
Either way, it's still gathering people.
Yes.
Who are going to become one people now.
Yes.
Because there's no more temple.
The dividing wall has been broken down. There's one new man in Christ. There's one olive tree with Jews and Gentiles in Christ as
grafted in.
Grafted in.
Right.
Yeah.
So then, do you go to verse 32?
I want to do one more. I want to put this, add another layer to this. If you look at John chapter 11, that's the conspiracy to kill Jesus. It says, therefore the chief priests and the Pharisees convened a council and were saying, what are we doing? For this man is performing many signs, talking about Jesus. Mm-hmm. If we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away our place in our nation. Mm. We kind of looked at this sort of thing.
Right.
But a certain one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you take into account that it is expedient for you that one man should die for the nation, and that the whole nation should not perish. Now this he did not say on his own initiative, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation.
Caiaphas.
Caiaphas said this, yes.
Prophesies that.
Prophesies this. God speaking through him. He probably didn't have the slightest idea what he was talking about. Right. But listen to verse 52. And not for the nation only, but that he might also gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. This language is very similar to what is being described here in verse 31. This gathering together. The gospel goes out to the... Remember, there were Jews living in Jerusalem from every nation under heaven. Right. The gospel goes out into that whole known world. Right. And this gathering is taking place. And it's culminating here. When that temple is destroyed, the distinctiveness of Judaism and its relationship to the temple and the whole Old Covenant is gone.
Because you can't die for the sins of the world, right? You can't. If this is the mystery that his death pays for the sins of the world, and now Jew and Gentile can come together.
Yes.
You can't have a Messiah who's paying for the sins of the world on his credit card, right? On his account. If there's still a temple over here.
Yeah.
And people are saying, well, I could either go to Jesus to get my sins forgiven, but then I got to kind of make him Lord and King and all that. Or I can just go over here.
Yeah, but you can't just go over there. You got to get circumcised. You got to follow the rituals of the Old Testament. You got to do all that.
Well, maybe if they get things working, there's that Gentile area. I can go over there maybe.
Yeah, it doesn't quite work that way.
But either way, it's gone now.
Yeah, that's gone.
It's gone.
So all of the things...
You can't have a Messiah who paid for the sins of the world and still have a temple where there's sacrifices and a high priest.
Right.
And everything else that goes with it. Right, because Jesus is everything.
Yeah. That's why there's neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female, because there were restrictions on women related to the congregation as well.
Right.
Those barriers, you see, are broken down in the New Testament. Women aren't separated and so forth. Circumcision is gone. You have to do no more blood.
Right.
There's no more shedding of blood.
So do you go to verse 32, now learn this, or do you kind of stop at 31?
No, I go on.
Okay, so 32. Now learn this, because now we're back to this, right?
Yes.
This whole thing did kind of start with the fig tree, right?
Yes.
Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away.
Yes. Fig tree. Notice what it says. And we already dealt with this in Matthew 21. Now learn the parable of the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. And if you go back and look at a lot of the Schofield Reference Bible, Hal Lindsey's Late Great Planet Earth, and a lot of other prophetic writings, they see this as Israel becoming a nation again.
So they would see, now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, as soon as you see Israel become a nation again, is how they would read that. You know that summer is near. They would say, you know that what is near? The end?
Well,
the prophetic clock is going to start ticking.
Yes, but see, if you look at Luke 21 again, which is a parallel to this, it doesn't say just the fig tree, but it says, and all the trees. Verse 29, Luke 21:29.
Okay.
And he told them a parable, behold, the fig tree and all the trees, as soon as they put forth leaves, you see it and know for yourselves that summer is now near. Even so, you too, when you see all these things happening, recognize that the kingdom of God is near. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So, if this idea of the fig tree is just telling them, when you see these certain things happening, just like you see leaves on a tree taking place, you know that summer is near. When you see all these things happening, you'll know that it is near, the kingdom of God is near. And truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place.
Right.
So if verse 34 means what it seems to mean, it means everything through verse 23 and into verse 34 refers to that generation and that generation alone. And now, we get to verse 34, and this is the way some people try to get around it. Verse 34, I said, boy, this... So when I first read, I was a new Christian, and I started reading the New Testament. I began with Matthew instead of John, and I got to a couple of places. Matthew 10:23, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel until you see the Son of Man coming.
Right.
There are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Matthew 16:27 through 28.
There's a lot of time indicators that
we haven't even discussed
this generation.
Yet.
Yeah, right.
And I got to this, and I get to verse 34. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. I didn't know what to do,
right?
Because it seemed to be saying he was talking about that particular generation, because I had read earlier in chapters 11 and 12 where this generation seemed to be applied to that generation, and also in Matthew, just the previous chapter. 23. Yeah.
This generation, brood of vipers, this generation, all the blood is going to be upon this generation. Right. And if all the blood is going to be upon this generation, and Jesus is saying, here's how it's going to happen, and this generation is not going to pass away until all these things happen. I mean, it's even if you were a little shaky on some things and maybe I haven't worked out, the time indicator seems to put it right smack there in their lifetime.
Yes. So a lot of people say, well, I mean, it seems to be saying that. In fact, almost every commentator you read says it seems to be saying that particular generation is in view here, but they'll say, well, it can't mean that. And so they say, well, what is really being said here is, truly I say to you...
But hold on, why can't it mean that?
Because they have a stake in a prophetic system that shapes everything about their theological position. And they don't want to admit that if they go with what the text actually states, they're having to say everything, verse 1 through 34, had to have been fulfilled before that generation passed away. And that messes with a lot of prophetic systems today, a lot of them. And I don't want to judge them on that, but they think they're comfortable in getting around what this seems to be saying on the face of it, when they'll say, well, truly I say to you, this race will not pass away until all these things take place.
Is this word generation ever translated race anywhere in the Bible?
No. No. The first place this...
I mean, I think your word on that. You should. So this word generation does not mean race?
No, it means generation. There's a Greek word, genos, G-E-N-O-S, in English, genos, which means race. The first use of generation is used in Matthew chapter 1, verse 17. And let's do a little bit of plug and play here. Mm-hmm. Therefore, all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations. From the deportation of Babylon to the time of Christ, 14 generations. So each time, Genia is used, not genos. Now, let's plug in the word race. Therefore, all the races from Abraham to David are 14 races, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to the time of Christ, 14
races.
Yeah, races.
Right, but there's only one race, isn't it?
Well, the human race, but
right. But I mean, they're talking about
a whole bunch of races. I guess. Dozens of races. It makes no sense.
Right, yeah.
So it can't mean race. It has to mean generation, because that's what the word means everywhere else. You go to Matthew 11 and 12 where Genia is used. They don't translate that as race. So the next thing they say is, it's this type of generation that won't pass away until all these things take place. And now you got to add a word to the text in order to make it work.
This type of generation, which is what Jehovah's Witnesses do on... deity, and other,
right? They add words in order to make it work. The word, the word isn't there.
But smart dudes, faithful dudes, have said that this word generation here means race of people.
Yeah, and the Jewish race of people. So think of the logic. Truly I say to you, the Jewish race will not pass away until all these things take place. So that means when all these things take place, the Jewish race passes away. That makes no sense.
Right.
Because they believe the Jewish race has some really important prophetic
But
deal.
we just went through 21, 22, 23, this generation. We never even thought about maybe we should read it this race of people, this race.
Yeah, if you look at it, all you have to do is go to Matthew let's see, 11:16. But to what shall I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplace who call out to the other children. But what shall I compare this race?
Yeah,
it's the wrong word.
Yeah.
Chapter 12, verse 39. But he answered and said to them, an evil and adulterous generation craves for a sign. And yet no sign shall be given to it but the sign of Jonah the prophet.
And it can't be race there because race does not identify a time, a
an
moment
evil
in
and
time.
adulterous race?
Right. It has to be. It's a time. It's another time statement.
Yes.
Interestingly enough,
The men of Nineveh shall stand up with this race. No, this generation. Verse 42. The queen of the south will stand up with this generation, not race. Verse 45. This is the way it will also be with this evil generation. I mean, it's
to quote Walter Matthau in JFK when he's talking to Costner in the beginning. He's explaining about the
Walter
JFK
Matthau?
assassination.
Was he?
He's in Walter Matthau. He's in the very beginning. He's Costner's friend at the FBI or whatever it is, and he's explaining all this about the bullet and the gun, and he's explaining that Lee Harvey Oswald had what was called Maggie's draws. He says Maggie's draws. That boy couldn't hit. He said I looked at all his because all your marksman records. He said that boy couldn't, And he says, and when I read the Warren Commission, he said, I said to myself, that dog don't hunt.
Yeah.
That dog don't hunt to take generation. Respectfully, you really have to look at a person and say, stop it.
Yeah.
Don't take this word and twist it. Like, play ball with what the Bible gives us. This generation.
And most commentators today no longer use this referring to race. The Schofield Reference Bible did, what was amazing, he says, and all lexicons agree that this should be translated as Guinea should be translated as race. No, it's what he said. And I have a chapter in my book on wars and rumors of wars on this particular passage, and I cite the lexicons, and they don't agree. This is generation. It is not race.
Well,
let's.
Well,
one more. They got one more out of this. Truly, I say to you, the generation that sees these signs will not pass away until all these things take place. The generation that sees these signs. Now notice what they did. They got rid of the word this. This is a near demonstrative, something that's near.
They went back to a time statement, if someone wants to do it that way. It's going to be a very particular group of people.
They get rid of the word, rid of the word this, they add the, and then they add more words that sees these signs.
Right.
I could get the Bible to say anything if I got to take words away and add words.
If you get 3 words for anything?
Oh, yeah. But look at verse 33. Even so, you too, when you see all these things, recognize that he is near, right at the door. It's better, it is near, meaning the kingdom of God as Luke describes it. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So what generation is going to see these signs? Not some distant future generation. That generation, the people who had heard this and their immediate descendants.
Do you end at verse 35?
I don't. I go on in my book, Last Days Madness, and I describe.
You go how far?
I go through the whole.
But in your Matthew 24, in Wars and Rumors of Wars, you go how far?
I only go through verse 34. Yeah.
Okay. So
in Last Days Madness, however, I go further.
So let's end on 35.
Okay.
Okay. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Because this kind of comes back to what we touched on earlier. What is heaven and earth, and what's going to pass away? You would say, this is the old covenant system. This is the temple. This was the whole world. Heaven and earth was seen. The connection between heaven and earth was seen with the temple of God.
Yes. Yeah.
It's going to pass away. It's going to go. Okay? But Jesus says his words will never pass away.
Yeah, the Old Testament, when the covenant is renewed, it's described as like a new heavens and a new earth. You see that language in Isaiah 65 and 66. Isaiah 65 talks about I create new heavens and new earth. 66, I create new heavens and new earth. And in that new heavens and new earth, there are people who are still dying.
Right.
So that can't be a renovated heaven and earth like what we talk about heaven, because people aren't going to die in heaven. So new heavens and new earth is the renewal of the covenant. And
it's going to be new, and you would say, once the temple is destroyed, we do have a new heaven and earth.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Heaven is new in one sense as well, and the earth is new in one sense as well. Is it not?
I believe so. In fact, the whole idea of the earth is expanded, where you had the tribes of Israel. Now you have the whole earth. The gospel goes into all the earth, goes into all the world. Right. And
by the power of the Spirit, which is now indwelling. That's kind of new, and right. That's kind of new.
Yeah.
That the Spirit's now indwelling every believer.
Yeah, we are new. Think about that. We are said to be new creatures in Christ.
Right.
The old has passed away.
Right.
Everything has become new.
Right. Heaven's new because Jesus is
enthroned. He's enthroned.
Right. Satan's no longer kind of going back and forth or whatever we think that is. It's new up there.
Yeah. Yeah. Resist the devil; he will flee from you. God will soon crush Satan under your feet.
Right.
I mean, the New Testament is new. The whole book of Hebrews is about the new covenant, and it's described as new heavens and new earth. Not much different. It's the reversal of what you have in verse 29. See, you have here the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. That's the old covenant described in sun, moon, and stars. Now the new covenant is, and that's not never going to go away.
It's the Spirit. It's Jesus' words.
Yeah.
Jesus' word. The word is spoken. We're given new life. Right. The Spirit indwells us, and we're now the temple. And we're these temples roam everywhere. Right. They don't just stay on a mountain. Right. This is
yes. Yeah. We take our we take our temple with us.
Right.
Yeah. And you see some of this in the book of Hebrews, for verse 18. For you have not come to a mountain that may be touched, into a blazing fire, and to darkness and gloom and whirlwind, into the blast of trumpet and the sound of words, which sound was much that those who heard begged that no further word should be given to them. For they could not bear the command, if even a beast touches the mountain, it will be stoned. And so terrible was the sight that Moses said, I am full of fear and trembling. That's the old covenant.
Right.
But you have come to Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to myriads of angels, to the general assembly and ecclesia, the church, the congregation, the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of righteous men made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood which speaks better than the blood of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who is speaking, for if those did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less shall we escape who turn away from him who warns from heaven. And his voice shook the earth then, yet once more he has promised, saying, yet once more I will shake not only the earth but also the heaven. And this expression, yet once more, denotes the removing of those things which can be shaken, as of created things, in order that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we receive a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us show gratitude by which we may offer to God an acceptable service with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. I mean, this is describing this new way of looking at the world, and new way of looking at life and redemption.
And there's no temple.
Yeah,
there's no more temple doing sacrifices. I want to wrap up, but I actually want to go farther in the wrap up. And this is a little risky.
Okay.
But someone says Matthew 24, it's all about the end of the world. You're saying, no, it's about the end of the temple and the old covenant system. Matthew 24 is about the temple in Jerusalem being destroyed. And someone says, and we just went through all this work. Even though my NIV says the destruction of the temple and the sign of the end times, that the temple is only mentioned once. It's like right in the beginning.
Yeah. Then
everything else we just went through. By the time we get to the end, I'm like, wait. Are we talking about the temple? I got so lost over here. And so I think to myself, what if we just got rid of Matthew 24? And someone said, convince me that this is actually about the destruction of the temple and not the end of the world. You would say, let's go to Luke.
Okay.
Let's go to Luke. Let's just go to Luke, because what always strikes me is it Luke 21?
Yes.
If you took away Matthew 24, and everyone agrees that Matthew 24 is the exact same thing.
Well, not exact.
Well,
but they begin the same way and they end the same way.
So but it's discussing the same thing.
Yes.
Is it not?
Yes.
Okay. So Matthew 21, 5. I don't think you'd have any trouble trying to explain to somebody that this was about the destruction of the temple, right? If we just started with Luke.
Yeah.
Right? Because it starts off by saying, and by the way, I have the exact same header here, the destruction of the temple and sign of the end times. So some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus said, as for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down. That's already way more information than we got in Matthew. It's so clear. Oh, they're talking about the temple. They're
the temple is described in
Look at this, beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus says, as for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Wow, they say, teacher. They asked, when will these things happen and what will be the sign? When he goes on to describe, he uses so much more language. And he actually talks about Jerusalem, because when he gets to verse 20, he says, when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near, that Jerusalem's desolation, that there's going to be an army. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those in the city get out. So now he's not talking about on the rooftop, in the field. He's not doing that thing anymore.
Well, he's got in verse 23, woe to those who are with child and to those who nurse babes, and for there will be great distress upon the land and wrath to this people.
Right, but when you say rooftops and even out in the field, for some reason you start to get, what does that mean? Like people start to get, I wonder what it's like. But he's so clear. He's saying, let those who are in the city get out. He's saying, get out of this city. It's about to be destroyed. And it's so clear. If you just read through, I would encourage people, if you read through Luke 21, you wouldn't get crazy if all you had was Luke 21. Like I just don't think you would get so wacky as people have gotten, because Luke 21 is just so clear that, look, I'm going to destroy the city. I tell you it's Jerusalem. I'm telling you to get out of the city. The armies are going to come and they're going to get around it. Now, my hurdle was, if someone looks up and goes, Jerusalem is surrounded. First of all, I think you would know if Rome was coming, correct?
Well, of course, Rome soldiers were already there in the city. They didn't come all the way from Rome in order to deal with it, although maybe some of them may have come in because there was a rebellion that was taking place.
But at some point historically, they did send armies to surround Jerusalem, correct?
Yes. Yeah, there was a command given to surround the city, and then for some strange reason, we learned from Josephus, they disbanded for a while.
And I think this is fascinating, right? So you're in Jerusalem, and all of a sudden, you're told, and you see, we're surrounded by the Roman army. Hey, Jesus said to get out when we see this. Well, I can't get out. We're surrounded. But Josephus records that something happens within the empire and they withdraw. They got to go fight somewhere else, or someone else murdered someone's sister or whatever, and they pull out. Now this was the opportunity.
One last time.
One last chance. And church historians talk about this. I mean, even the early dispensationalists. I mean, you can read the church fathers, and they go so far as to say. Now I'm quoting dispensationalists. They go so far as to say that every single Christian got out.
Right. To play Petra, they'll say that they.
Right. Yeah. And now we're at Christian kind of folklore. But the point is people knew that Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. It got surrounded. The armies pulled back. And the Christians got out. And what was left, and just end with the context here of this destruction. Why ultimately did Rome, as an active agent of God's judgment, why did Rome come in and say they were done with Jerusalem? They'd been protecting them. They'd been, what finally happened to where Rome, because I can't imagine they did this to a lot of cities, especially, Jerusalem was the city of cities.
I think if you go back a little bit, there was always this zealot rebellion under the surface that was taking place. There was always the threat trying to keep an insurrection down. That's why those who brought Jesus to trial before the Romans used this idea that tax rebellion, he was a king of the Jews.
Right.
He was going to start a rebellion. And Pilate, of course, his wife says, "Don't have any, I had a dream. Don't have anything to do with this man." Pilate wanted to let him go.
Right.
And so there was always the threat that the Jews would rebel and it would be a slaughter. And so I think the Romans were actually very patient at this point in time by surrounding the city, and they would say, "Look, maybe this will, get these people to understand that we're serious here." So they do it. Then they break bands and they leave. Still didn't work, and there was no intent ever to destroy the temple. The Romans had no intention to destroy the temple. It was the Jews themselves that had done it, and the bloodletting that took place in there as well. So they were antagonists, and it was like the Roman soldiers saying, "Look, we have to defend ourselves." But there was never the intent of the Romans to destroy the temple. It was really the blame was on those Jews who were antagonistic to the Romans.
But that generation was ready to go to war against Rome, right? I mean, they were ready to fight.
Yeah, and
right. I mean,
yes,
and wasn't the idea? Right. The idea was that God is with us.
Exactly.
God is with us.
Some of them.
This is going to be the deliverance.
Right. That somebody's going to come. God is going to do it.
We're not going to be enslaved anymore. The relationship is now broken up. It's now we're going to war and we're going to fight the Romans and God's going to deliver us. The Christians, those who are following Christ, see this break. They get out, they flee to the mountains, and what's left now is really, it's nationalism, right? It's this war, and God's going to deliver us, and they get obliterated.
Yeah, and by the way, this was much of the disappointment by Judas and others with Jesus. They thought he was their promised Messiah who was going to lead them to victory. And now we're back to Matthew 21 again.
Wow.
Because Jesus, here he is entering Jerusalem on a donkey, and they're singing, say to the daughter of Zion, "Behold, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted upon a donkey, even upon a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." And the disciples went and did just as Jesus had directed them, and brought the donkey and the colt and laid on them their garments, on which he sat. And most of the multitude spread their garments in the road, and others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them in the road. And the multitudes going before him and those who followed after him were crying out, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" And when he had entered Jerusalem, the city was stirred, saying, "Who is this?" And the multitudes were saying, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee." And so these people were expecting their Messiah.
This is going to be a national revival. We have a king. We're no longer going to be enslaved.
Look at that. He had fed. I mean, look, it's everything. It's everything that every politician dreams of. We're going to need a guy who's going to feed everybody, raise them from the dead, remove them from political oppression.
Free health care.
Free health care. Yeah. Who needs health care? This guy would just bring the sick in and he'll heal them all.
Right.
But Jesus, he has a completely different agenda, because the first thing he does, he cleanses the temple.
Right.
And this, but they were still looking for a Messiah, and I believe that the Jews, in the lead up to the destruction of Jerusalem, believed that God was going to rescue them if they opposed Rome. The problem wasn't Rome; the problem was themselves and their unbelief, and it all went south very quickly.
And so, if you could wrap this up for me, because this you were the first person I ever heard say this, and it really stuck with me, which was, that's what Jesus meant when he said that my kingdom, right, is not of this, right,
realm or
right, not of this world,
yeah,
right, because his disciples wanted to pick up a sword and say, let's fight, right? We got Jesus with us, let's go.
Yeah, this is a guy who can walk on water.
Right, right.
We've seen that.
Right,
We've seen
right,
him do that.
right. And so Jesus says, no, I could call down angels right now, and I could just slaughter everybody.
Yeah, which is what
they
many
wanted.
of them wanted, and what
Right.
I mean, the sons of thunder,
Right.
James and John.
Down, right,
I mean,
yeah,
just
yeah.
thrones and all that sort of thing. I mean, everybody was expecting
It's hot.
Jesus to do this.
Right, right. But Jesus says that my kingdom is not of this world. Meaning that the way we advance and the way we win is not through some military conquest like everyone had done it from Rome all the way back to Babylon, right? Like, might makes right. You come in and you just
mow them down,
right.
Force them to, go along with the plan, and then every one was more powerful than the one before.
Right.
That's what they expected to happen. Jesus, when he said, my kingdom is not of this world, that is, it does not derive its power from this world. It does not advance through armies. It advances through the power of the Spirit and transform lives.
And it does that because Rome comes in, destroys Jerusalem. It's still the world power. It does start killing Christians eventually, slaughtering Christians. There is a persecution.
There is. Yeah.
Right? But within 300 years, without an army, without a war, and without acting like all the other powers had done in revolts and militias before that, the Roman Empire is toppled because of conversion without a war.
Yeah.
And if we go back to how we use world in the Bible, that's a pretty powerful moment that when the Roman Empire, when the head of the Roman Empire, when you get Constantine, converts. I know people want to talk about what's a real conversion. It's like, well, are you going to tell me it's George W.? I know people say, I don't think George Bush is a Christian. I mean, everyone's got their take on what counts as a true Christian, right? But the point is who's naming themselves in Christ? And the Roman Empire, I mean, it's an incredible end to the power of the gospel and how the world is actually converted, and that Rome was the agent that even did the judgment.
Yeah, I mean, it's you look back over the history. Jesus picks 12 apostles. One of them betrays him. They seem defeated. You got their spokesperson, Peter, denying Jesus 3 times. Jesus leaves, bye. I'm going to send someone else, but
Right.
It's going to be a little different.
Right.
Persecution takes place. Stephen, persecution of the church by their fellow Jews. James, the brother of John, by Herod.
And yet thousands are coming. I mean,
all
throughout the book of Acts, thousands and thousands and thousands of people are being converted.
Yeah, these are only the ones that are recorded.
Right.
You have a jailer that's converted. The gospel goes all the way to what we know today as Great Britain.
Right.
The world, literally, the world was transformed.
Right.
What we see around us today is the fruit of Christianity. This is Deuteronomy chapter 8. You get rich and then you forget why you got rich.
Right.
And that's what we're facing today. And you've got Christians who have abandoned this idea of discipleship, discipling the nations. They don't think that's their job. They're just supposed to preach the gospel and wait for the end to come. We're living in a different world today. We need to get back to this understanding of what the New Testament is all about. We're not going to be rescued by a rapture. We're stuck here, and we better get used to it. And if you want to, this world's going to change one way or another, and it may be 2 generations from now where we're coming out of this stupor and we get knocked about by secular forces, but it's our own fault. Just like it was Israel's fault And this is why those, the book of Revelation written to those 7 churches is a warning. That warning is to us as well. We've abandoned our first love in essence, and those who haven't have just minimized his kingship and how broad that kingship is. We need to get back to that. We need to get off this idea that the world's coming to an end and Jesus is going to rescue us. Very much like the Jews who thought Jesus was going to come and rescue them with the Romans. It didn't happen.
Wow.
And people have been predicting the end for a very, very long time. They've used the same verses, everything we went through, generation after generation after generation after generation after generation. They've used the same verses to try to make the same claim that this referred to their particular generation, when Matthew 24 is very clear. It was referring to their generation. Doesn't mean we don't go through tribulation. Jesus said, in the world you have tribulation. But that's not what this is talking about. This was a very specific generation that was related to that generation and the end of the old covenant, which opened up the world. No longer do we have to go to a place. No longer do we have to have human failing priests. No longer do we have to offer sacrifices. It's completely changed.
Matthew 24. Did it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, wow.